Okay, so if you are still with us, thank you so much for staying on. If you are just joining, I understand that we are just a few minutes behind. Our session one was so action-packed and full of great information, it did run over a little bit. So we are running a little into our session two today, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to session two, Introduction to Databricks. Before we get started with our presentation, I do want to share a few reminders for those of you who are just joining us or joined us late. As our speakers present, please remember to stay muted to minimize distractions and interruptions. And if you do have a question during our presentation, please submit it using the Zoom chat feature. At the end of our session, the questions will be answered by our session speakers. So just a note there, we are going to make sure that all of our questions are being noted and written down. That way we can copy it over. That way we can get anything that we don't have time to answer or that needs more clarification to our presenters after we wrap today. And then we can get those answers for you and they will be published after our event. So with that, we are going to kick things off in our first half of our session today with some Databricks testimonials. And those are going to be led by Nancy, Noah, and Andrew. And they are going to be individually giving you some more information about themselves as they present. So with that, I'm going to first pass things over to Nancy, I believe is going to be our first speaker. So I'm going to pass it over to her now and mute myself.
Hello. I can still see you, Julia. Can you see me?
Yep, we can see you.
Okay.
I can see you, but on my end, I can also see the deck. Is the deck up for you on your
The
view?
deck is up. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide.
Sure thing.
Great. Hi, I'm Nancy Sonnenfeld. I'm a senior technical advisor for the Quality Improvement Organization program. And I was asked to talk about my experience making the transition from SAS in the CCW to Databricks using R and Python. So a little bit about me. I've used SAS for many years. You can see a timeline. I first started using SAS in 1989 in graduate school. And I pretty much had SAS intensive study or work from 1989 through 2011. In 2011, I took an administrative job at CMS and had no access to any data environment for about 3 years except PC SAS on my laptop. And at that time, although I was already working for the QIO program, I was told that I did not want to work in the precursor to the CDR, which was the HICS environment, that it was so challenging I shouldn't even try. So instead, in 2014, I got access to the chronic condition warehouse, and I learned how to access claims in MDS using SAS in the CCW. CCW has a wonderful introductory course that assumes that the user knows how to use SAS and it focuses instead on giving insight into what it means to work with CMS data. For example, I learned how to do basic things like identify all the Medicare fee-for-service beneficiaries with diabetes who were enrolled in a given year. However, I had at that time primarily an administrative job, and analytics was something of a guilty pleasure. So in 2020, I finally got access to the CDR, and I used SAS Viya to access many of the same data sets that I had been accessing through the CW. I made an effort to use CDR because I knew that the QIO program contractors were using it, and I didn't find it any harder to use than CCW, except that the data dictionaries were really an issue at that point in time, and that learning how to use a new data set was extremely challenging. I did find data processing to be slow, but it was also slow in the CCW. In the middle of 2023, I prioritized my own development and managed to get a detail that allowed me to do some basic descriptive data management and analysis for about 50% time for about 9 months. So here I am. It's been almost 15 years since I've program regularly, and I'm an impatient adult learner with limited time to acquire new skills. And even during my detail, I had limited ability to control my schedule. I usually had a conflict for these data camp sessions. I had one today. I prioritized this instead. And I consistently missed the opportunities for continuing education. In 2024, I hadn't quite finished the project, but I got busier with more administrative responsibilities. So again, I had less time for data analysis. And in the next couple slides, I'm going to talk about my experiences in 2023 and 2024. Next slide, please. So when I moved from SAS VIA to R, I saw that data processing was much faster, especially when I was looking to select data from millions of MDS assessments. So that was really great. And it was great that I didn't need a manual. I was just able to Google things, and people had examples for using R. I did have to make a mental transition. I found manipulating columns to be easier in R than in SAS, but manipulating rows to be harder. I had colleagues who helped me write functions that were very similar to arrays, what I did with arrays in SAS. But I still really need some help with this sometimes, and I'm not afraid to ask. So I consider myself to be a work in progress that way. The other thing I learned after investing a lot of time in R, because I'm interested in statistical applications, and R is really great for that it isn't very good for data management. There are multiple ways to do the same thing, so I could find it very confusing. I would find an example for how you would do things with one library within R when I was working in another one. That was a problem. I found I was constantly running out of memory, even when the data sets weren't very big, but that came from having multiple steps to create a new data set. So this is really not an ideal use. Data management is not an ideal use for R. Once I had a memory problem, then I had to wait to reconnect to the R cluster. Another exercise in frustration that I understand is getting better. And as the previous speaker mentioned, in 2023, there was no integration between the Hive Metastore. So it took a lot of steps to read data sets. And then there were some issues with changing references to S buckets on the workbench. Next slide. In 2024, things got so much better. And so even though I was now back to having much more divided time and quickly forgot almost everything that I learned, things are really, really better. So the Metastore is integrated with R, so it's easier to identify files and access them. And when I went to learn Python, because it's really better for data management, I learned that I didn't actually have to learn Python. At this point, I can type into the Databricks AI assistant a command in R in my Python cluster, and the assistant will fix my code for me. At a certain point, I realized I didn't even have to go that far. I could just type the word read and then the name and location of the file, and the assistant will write the code for me. I love it. So the Catalog Explorer makes it easier to find databases than in 2023. And it was exciting to hear what Caitlin had to say about data dictionaries, because I still think that's the hardest part. I was asked to reflect on my experience with Data Camp. As I've already mentioned, I don't have control over my schedule, and I usually have a conflict so that I can't learn in real time. However, I do find the example notebooks from all the Data Camp sessions that I missed are excellent for learning to code. And I'm also working through the PySpark exercises that have been listed when I ever have a little free time. I'm glad to hear that the data documentation is getting to be better. I still think it is a pain point. And I think even though CCSQ, the team does an amazing job supporting the computer the computing environment, there are not a lot of sessions on use cases for different databases. For example, why are there more beneficiaries in the BIC from the past year than CMS has an official count of Medicare enrollees? The answer is that the official Medicare enrollee stats are actually based on monthly enrollments, not annual enrollments. I'm not sure that's obvious. So I still find the CCW training and documentation to be very helpful if I want to know something about use cases for specific databases. And I think it would be great if there were more use case examples to specific databases. But in general, this is just so much easier than it's been. So do you want me to answer questions now or to pass the floor to my colleagues and then we'll answer questions after we've all talked? I think I'll do that. I'm going to pass the floor to Noah Johnson and Andrew Yaspin.
Okay, sounds good. So with that, we can pass it over to our next speaker.
I think I was volunteered to go first, or I volunteered to go first. So, I want to say that a lot of the things I was going to say have been covered by Ken in the first presentation, but I'm just going to walk through some reasons I think that we should get enthusiastic. I think some people might be looking at this SaaS transition as, oh, darn, it's more work for me. But I think that we should be positive about it. So I know it's hard to break up with SaaS. I learned SaaS like Nancy in graduate school. I used it almost exclusively in my last two jobs, or at least 2 jobs ago, and my last one like 50-50. But SaaS is really expensive. We pay all these massive licensing fees as an organization. That money can be better spent on other things. It lacks flexibility. So, Nancy talked about the fact that R has these different packages. And one of the really cool things about open source software is that people can develop these different packages and these different libraries. And I think Ken said that there's like 1,000 Python libraries that Databricks supports. SaaS doesn't sort of have that open collaboration aspect. In SaaS Studio, there's only SaaS. If you come in with a SaaS background, that's great. But if you don't, then you sort of have to learn SaaS. There's no notebook feature in SaaS Studio or in regular SaaS. So notebooks are this really cool thing where when you write your code, you can write it in this sort of user interface that allows you to put comments or explanations or even just regular text, so you can view the output in a nice, like, clean PDF. And something Ken brought up, which I think is true, which is that SaaS is just not current. Most schools, students who are coming out do not learn SaaS. They learn R, they learn Python. It's just, I think schools, especially universities, have been looking at the cost of SaaS and the lack of flexibility and said, why would we use this? SaaS to you does not have an AI assistant like Nancy mentioned. And once you start coding with one, it completely changes your life. It has changed it for me. And I would say that it also just lacks in user interface design. The interface that you use for SaaS Studio is always playing catch up to RStudio, to Databricks, to sort of these other options. Next page. Next slide, I guess. Okay. So I think everybody should be really excited about the options that are coming online. Databricks is part of a new generation of analytics tool. It's part of the zeitgeist for data science. It's what friends, I live in the Bay Area. People I know in the private sector use it. It's just really current. It's, I think a best in class sort of software. It's really cool because you can use different coding languages. So as Nancy pointed out, you can use R, you can use Python, you can use SQL, you can use Scala. It allows people with different backgrounds to use what they're most familiar with, or you can use different things for different applications. So for example, if you want to, I prefer data visualizations in R, but like Nancy said, I like querying large data tables from SQL. So it's really nice to have this integration of these different languages. It's highly flexible. All these have these awesome resources, packages. They're open source. Databricks isn't free, but these other underlying softwares are free, and so that creates sort of more resources to go into the Databricks environment rather than paying for the underlying coding software. And the notebooks are really clean, they're really easy to use. The collaboration features are really awesome when you're working in notebooks. This is what people are who are graduating are learning, which I think, like, in terms of as an organization, if we want to hire top talent, people who are graduating from schools with backgrounds in data science, economics, mathematics, statistics, this is what they're used to. This is what the skills are going to bring. And I would say for anyone who's nervous, the AI assistant tool is incredible. So when I first started here in 2021, I decided that I agree. Nancy brought up the R, which was sort of my second best language after SAS. It really didn't work well with the Hive Metastore, and it was sort of shaky. So I started learning. Started learning Python. I took classes and I was really slow and I was sort of okay at it. And then the AI assistant tool came, and now I don't even bother because it's so cool how you can just write something, say, query this database and do this analysis and put it as a table and filter for this. And it just writes it all for you. It's truly mind-blowing, and I would say that it has allowed me to spend so much more time focusing on the big picture elements of the projects instead of the debugging and trying to figure out, like, why a missing comma is, why my code isn't working. So I think that this tool is truly incredible, and it just opens up a lot of doors that SAS didn't. So I think that people should be really enthusiastic, and even though it might be scary at first, jump in. The water's warm, and I have absolutely loved it. I tell people all the time that I meet that I think that this is, we have tools that are at the forefront of data science. I could pass it over to Andrew. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Andrew.
Hello, I'm bursting out of this background here. Yes, I think Nancy and Noah hit on a lot of the really important points in relation to why we're adopting and excited about Databricks. I guess just for a bit of background, and hopefully I'll make way for questions to be answered if possible. Yeah, before like going into any formal education around programming, I engaged in some self-driven learning of R and Python, say mostly R, actually primarily because of the visualization package ggplot. And from there, I sort of was interested enough in the practice of programming and using it for data analysis to go into a graduate program, where I did have some formal training in Python for data preparation, and to some degree statistics, but probably even more machine learning. And then for R, more statistics, those sort of paired with specific classes that I took, and actually I think reflect very well what each program language's strengths are, much like SQL is really the best for querying data. So they all have like their specific, strength, which is one of the really great things about being able to leverage Databricks. You can even use them all in the same notebook, although that would probably bring its own complications. As far as my experience in being a user within the CCSQ like data platform space, I basically came in hoping and praying that we were going to be moving away from SAS, as it was not my experience. And my maybe it was assumption, but what I felt was fairly validated was the way that SAS is developed is for a sort of specifically trained universe of people, to leverage a lot of what they pre-package, as sophisticated analysis tools. But for those who really have sort of already made the investment of learning SAS. Thankfully, there were some avenues for me to explore the use of the open source languages I got to know and love, since we're using the nice emotional language here, of Python and R, and that was through either Jupyter notebooks, experimenting with different environments, and also those made available by ISG, but then eventually Zeppelin. And in being a user and being so afraid of using SAS, although there are certain circumstances where I kind of just had to figure it out. Thankfully, when you learn programming, sort of debugging and being able to break things down to at least to a portion of code that you can actually understand is kind of a big part of the learning process. I'm sure many know. But all that to say, I was very much interested in using the languages I knew. I was able to sort of be someone who would test the boundaries of what was being set up, and sort of, really buck against like the limitations, in the sense that I was trying to use paradigms of data access, data sharing, code sharing that I had learned in graduate school. And that's where I'm seeing, especially a lot of the announcements about the functionality today, really taking us to that, next place of not just being able to sort of find the language and environment that suits our ability to do this analysis, but really like turning all of this into usable knowledge, and making that available in formats that are accessible, whether or not it is, getting assistance from, a generative model, or it is having a data catalog interface that is, uh, easier to use and makes it possible so that, maybe someone's frustrations, challenges sort of make their way more easily into the way that people are interpreting and understanding the information that is provided in those catalogs. Um, I think, I made a case in the last, I don't know if it was the last data camp or maybe 2 data camps ago, that there is a specific type of effort that I think we need to take on as users, which is to sort of build into and think about how we play a role in that learning community. And we're adding to the learning that we seek to take away, by sharing the frustrations, sharing the shortcuts, making sure that we're making assumptions methodology available, because that is the way that the learning sort of gets infused into what we do, and then similarly gets sort of brought into any sort of like research publication you might end up working on, or deliverable you have for your contract. And will probably make that whole effort seamless and sort of like traceable. So another plea to take part in some of the initiatives that are made available using these tools, and even some of the project management tools that we have available, so that we're really building up that knowledge base, and we're trying to avoid rebuilding and recreating wheels. It would be great to continue to build scripts that have a source in something that we all trust, because I think the status quo is for a lot to be done behind silos and walls, and that doesn't do a whole lot for this this aspiration of a learning network. So I've gone a little long, and I'll cut it off there. But thank you for attending and listening.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so with that, next we are going to move into our introduction to Databricks portion. And we are going to pass things over to Oren next for this portion of our session. So Oren, with that, do you want to kick things off? And I know that you have a demo coming, so I can stop screen sharing if that's easier as well.
That would be, thank you. Okay, can people see my screen?
Yep, now we can.
Excellent. So we're just going to go into a quick introduction to Databricks, talk about why Databricks, talking about some of the important parts of it, and some things about notebooks. So first of all, why did we choose Databricks? So we moved from SAS and we changed it to Databricks. And the question is why? And Databricks it's new and it's exciting. It allows you to it's a single platform and it simplifies data engineering, data science, and analytics all into one spot. So it's designed to help you store your data, and it has all those notebooks, and you do all that stuff. It combines data ingestion, data processing, advanced analytics, all one platform. And it's founded by the people that created Apache Spark. So it offers an optimized version of Spark. And that's one reason why we encourage Spark. And it's built on open source technology, so it really integrates well with existing data systems. So the main aspects of Databricks are the ones on the left here, where you have the workspace, you have the catalog, and you have the workflows. So let's just talk about the workspace. And if you go to workspace, you can see that you have a home folder where you have all your stuff, and you can see I have all my programs here. You can see there's a workspace. You can see that there are team folders, and you can see that there are user folders. You can see there's a shared folder, and you can store things there. So as we just showed, folders are provided for each user and group. Files can be shared with other team members. So I can go to one of my files, I can go to share, and I can change to as access, which makes it easy for me to share with other members of my team and maybe even people outside of my team if I'm working on something that requires me to work with multiple groups. When you share, please don't share files with everybody. So one thing you don't want to do is, for example, suppose I go here, you don't want to do all users. And if you do all users, you want to make sure you control what you give them to. So maybe you only want to do can do. For example, our data camp stuff, that's all working with users, and so is our office hours. But make sure you're careful of how you do that, and you probably shouldn't be doing that at all. The best practice is that you only want to have programs in your workspace. So that's because your Databricks workspace is not the same as your S3 workbench. And stuff on the Databricks workspace can only be read by Databricks. So what you want to do is your best practice is you only have programs there, and you want to keep those in your user folder. You want to move them eventually to your teams folder, and eventually you probably want to move it to GitHub. If you have more questions about the workspace, you can find more information in our lesson 1 of office hours. Just as something to keep in mind, when we talk about SAS, workspace and workbench are nearly synonyms. In Databricks, they're different. So the workbench, that's what SAS has, that points to S3. And at that S3 location, it can be connected to by anything. It can be connected to by SAS, it can be connected by Databricks, it can be connected to by UFM. The Databricks workspace, that's something totally different. It's not something we fully control at the moment. So things on the workspace may not be as safe as stuff on the workbench. So you want to make sure that you understand the workbench and the workspace, and you want to make sure to try and set yourself on the workbench. And if you want more information about that, you can find them in lesson 1 and lesson 2 of office hours. Okay, next up is catalogs. The catalogs over here. This is the database part of the CDR, and this is where we store things. This is where we store things like IT's data, beneficiary data, where we store part A, part B, part C data. And what we can do is we can go to public data. And what you can see is that there are two things. There are schemas and there are tables inside the schema. The catalog works like a database. So you can only store things in the schema and data format. And when you look at it, you can see things like here's the owner. You can look at details. It'll tell you where the location of the file. And then we can click on a file. And this will show you an overview. It's going to show you things about each of the columns and their type. And apparently here we have some comments that are set up. And then you can see some sample data. And this is public data, so it is, anyone can see it. This is talking about like zip code information. So you can see things about your data, and then you can see details. And yeah, just things to keep in mind is that a catalog is different than your workbench because a catalog can't have folders put in them. It has to follow the same database structure as any database does. And it's very useful because you can use Databricks SQL to connect to it and to manipulate any data inside of it. And the third major aspect is compute. So there are three types of compute clusters. There's all-purpose, job, and SQL warehouse. The ones that you are mainly been using and you've been using pretty much exclusively until a few weeks ago were the all-purpose ones. Those are designed so that users can road code interactively for development and testing purposes. And really, the best practice is you want to use this more for testing and more for development and less to run complete processes. So ideally, you want to try and use subset of data on these clusters, make sure that your process works. And then when your process works, you want to move it to a job cluster, probably via a workflow. And at the moment, your team starts out with two all-purpose compute clusters by default. One that's designed for programming in R, another designed for programming in Python. And it has limited resources that need to be shared by the entire team. So if all your team is working on it and you have a huge team, you're pretty quickly going to run out of resources. And that's why it is so important to make sure that you're only running a subset of your data. Because if you run all your data, you're going to just fill up your cluster with jobs and nothing's going to work. Job clusters, those are designed for running scheduled jobs, and they're optimized for cost efficiency. And they're also set up so they can use more resources than your all-purpose clusters. And that means you can do more resource-intensive tasks. And you're also not sharing them with other people. The job cluster that you create, that's your job cluster. You don't need to worry about other people. And then there's the SAS to DBX connection that connects to a SQL warehouse compute. It's only designed to support SQL queries, and it can also support resource-intensive tasks. So those are the main aspects of Databricks. One of the things that are central to Databricks are notebooks. So Databricks, it supports multiple programming languages, Python, R, SQL, and Scala. In our environment, we're mainly a Python R shop. So we're going to have a lot of our resources focused on those two, and not too much on Scala, and obviously SQL, that's something that everyone uses. And the cool thing about it is that the cool thing about notebooks is that you can mix code, visualizations, and markdown text. And that makes it easier to document and collaborate. For example, this is markdown. Right here, we have code, and down a bit more, we're going to have visualization. And it also allows for you to do stuff in real time. So if there were other users that had write access, they could go here and they could type things while I'm typing things. And we could type things to each other. And that makes it easier if you're far away to work together because like you can actually comment at the same time. And they can be scheduled as jobs or shared with stakeholders for insight. So notebooks are primarily made up of commands. And this is one command right here. This is a basic command. And if you go up here, you'll see that the command changes. When I go here, you'll see it's one thing. You go here, you see it changes. That's because these commands are different. And so here's a simple command. This one just would print out hello world. But other things you can do is you can install libraries. And one library we're installing here is called a Bamboo Lib. And Bamboo Lib is something we're going to talk about later. It's going to be very useful for people that are being introduced to Databricks. For right now, you're seeing I can install things that aren't necessarily part of our environment, but I can still install packages and I can do things with them. And here what I'm doing is I am just reading in data from BambooLib. I am reading in a data set called Titanic CSV, and I'm reading it into a data frame. And so if you're completely unfamiliar with Python, R, and SQL, you probably want to start with something like this, with a display statement in Python. And what that does, it shows you a table. And here I'm doing the display table. And you can see I'm getting information about my table. I can see all the columns. I can see that I can have 891 rows. And I can go down here. I can look at any of my 891 rows. And I can get a basic view. But what other things I can do is if I click on this plus, I can hit data visualization, I can hit data profile, and I get data profile and visualization. So this is what data profile does. It shows me information about my table. It shows me about my field. So here it's showing me that I have 7 numeric columns. It's showing me the number of unique values I have. So for age, for example, I have 714 unique ones. I have about 20% missing. And then it's giving me a mean, a standard deviation, the number of zeros, a bit of information about it, and it's giving me a histogram showing how the data looks. I go down here, and you go to categorical features, and you can see something similar for the character fields. You can see I have the number of how many unique values there are, the number of missing. For cabin, for example, I have 204, 77.1% missing. That's a lot missing, so that's why I'm only getting 204 here. I have only 149 unique values. And then it's telling me things like the average length of the string. It's telling me which one shows up most often. And then it's giving me a graph to see how my data looks. So that is use of data profile. The other thing it lets you do is it lets you do visualizations. And here we have 3 visualizations. I have a bar chart, a combo chart, and a pie chart. And if we go to edit visualization, you can see some of the things that you have, the options you have. You can see that I have a number of ones to choose from. About 15 options here. And you can see I can set my X value, I can set a Y value, and I can group by, it looks like that. I can decide if I want to stack it or not. So I can stack like that, goes on top. Or maybe I want to normalize the percentage, and it'll show me the percent. So on and so forth. I can do things with, I can hit this if I wanted it to go horizontal. And then I can change things on my X-axis and my Y-axis. I can change names. And then I can set where I want the axes. I can change the colors, and I can change how labels and stuff and how things look. And I'm going to do that saving, and you can see that I have a number of these. I have a bar chart, I have a combo chart, I have a pie chart. And one of the things I can do when I click on this, I can either download, I can remove it, I can duplicate, rename, edit, or I can add to a notebook dashboard, which is going to be the next thing we can show. And so what notebook dashboards do is they're designed for sharing insights with non-technical stakeholders. Basically, I can create a streamlined view of key metrics and visualizations without you having to see the underlying code and complexity found in a notebook. And notebooks, they're great for exploration and detail analysis. But dashboards are going to let me get something that is simple. And basically, it is based on the notebook. And it's something that can be easily shared with others. And it's print link. So for example, my notebook dashboard is right here. And then you go there. And you can see I have two of these things. This was the pie chart for my thing. I added that. This was number of survivors by gender. I added that. You can see that's my dashboard. If I wanted to change things, I could go to exit, and I could add things in this location. I could add things like tables and stuff like that. And you do it from that link above. So look up above. Once you run that display DF Titanic, that's something you can add. Yeah. Once you've gotten beyond that and you've learned how to use that display in a data frame to your advantage, the next thing you can look at is BambooLib, and it is a low-code tool that provides a graphic user interface with the capabilities of pandas. You have to remember it uses pandas, not Spark, so there's a limit to how much it can support. But it can support pretty large data sets, but there's a limit. I think it's a few million records we're talking. And it can be used to access and load data from database tables, CSV files, or Parquet files. So basically anything that is in your catalog you can access, or it can get stuff from your workbench, as long as it is in the CSV or Parquet format. And then once it's loaded, it can be used to explore, clean, visualize, and analyze your data. And it's also going to generate the underlying pandas code for each of the app and like the Visual Studio, so you can easily replicate what you did. We did talk about this in our office hours, and it is also an 11. It's not out on the portal yet, but it should be soon. In the meantime, you can find more information about it here.
Hey, Oren, just real quick, I wanted to just a quick reminder that we have about 2 more minutes to wrap up.
Okay. So just as your ideas for starting to get used to Databricks, but you're probably going to use, SQL, you're probably going to use SQL, but otherwise you're going to want to use those visualization tools and the data profile tool, and then you're probably going to want to use BambooLib, and then you can get into more programming to do the things that you need to do. Strategies for Notebook. Just when you're writing Notebook, just need to keep in mind that a proper design will make it easier for you to maintain your stuff and debug your programs. You should really think of a notebook like an essay. So basically your idea is you want each command in a notebook to have one single sentence, and then each notebook, the paragraph. You want to make sure it has a specific goal, doesn't try to do so much. You like a paragraph in an essay, it has a topic sentence. You want to try and do something similar for each notebook. And then you probably want to combine many notebooks together to build a process. And you can do that via a workflow. And just like an essay is an introduction, you want to have in your processes, you want to have an introduction notebook. And this intro notebook might be something that has your functions or might have widgets, but things like that. But you want to make sure that you have things that are introductory, and SAS was your auto exec and things like that. And then you want to also have something that runs at the end that's like a conclusion, where you get rid of all the files you no longer need. The other major thing you need to know about are workflows. We're pretty much out of time, so we have some stuff here. If you're interested in those, you can see it in part 1, in lesson 1 of our office hours. And just as a reminder, we have things on the portal. We have the CSSQ data analytics portal. It has materials that can help you with your transition to Databricks. We have 10, soon to be 11 office hours. We have a number of things about data camp, and we have a number of demos, and you can find information right there. Okay, are there any questions? I will stop sharing.
So, Oren, we did have a couple questions, but just to get us back on track, I'm proposing that we answer them, like in the chat itself and get those answers to the users themselves and then publish them so we can, get everyone a break since our sessions have been running over, and then, move on to session 3, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, cool. So Oren and the rest of our presenters today, so thank you so much for presenting. We appreciate it. And then, as I said, I think there's 2 or 3 questions that did not get addressed yet in the chat. So we'll make sure to get those to Oren or other presenters if it needs to go to them. And then I saw another one just get in as well. So we will make sure that they get those and they get answered. And then all of our questions will be published in the Q&A portion, and then put in the portal after our event wraps. Just make sure to give us a few days to get everything 508'd and compliant, and get those answers tracked down for anything outstanding. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close out this session. Our next session is going to begin in about 8-ish minutes, to give everyone a break. And it's gonna be data analytics with Databricks AI BI, and that's gonna begin at 3 p.m. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording now.